Taiwan residents will vote to elect the leader of the region on Saturday. Candidates have been holding mass rallies on Friday in a final push to convince voters. Take a look.
Plenty of enthusiasm on display at the two main parties' pre-election rallies in Taiwan. But one party appears to have much more reason for optimism. The woman who has led Taiwan for the past 4 years, Tsai Ing-wen of the pro-independence Democratic Progressive Party, has a healthy lead in the polls over her KMT rival, Han Kuo-yu, an improbable prospect just a year ago. But then came the Hong Kong protests.
Well, Hong Kong was supposed to be a showcase for one country, two systems policy of China, and ultimately the one country, two systems policy was supposed to include Taiwan. After the intensification of the series of protests in Hong Kong, I think the DPP was able to make use of that issue.
While the DPP painted the policy as a failure, analysts say KMT candidate Han struggled to address Taiwan people's concerns.
Han underestimated the impact of events in Hong Kong, mainly the political fallout, and he didn't give voters, especially the younger voters, the impression that he would be able to stand up for Taiwan's interests. He tried to repair that image, but it was too late.
Han has tried to capitalize on concerns over the DPP's handling of the economy.
KMT is, of course, selling the idea that if a KMT candidate is elected, then the cross-strait relations would improve, and thereby the economic livelihood of Taiwanese would similarly improve.
But polls suggest that's not likely to be enough to lead the KMT's Han to victory over incumbent Tsai of the DPP, though analysts say they expect the result to be a lot closer than the polls have been indicating.
For more about what to come in Taiwan, let's go to the two guests we have. In Taipei, we have Joanna Lei, former CEO of the Chenghua 21st Century think tank. Also in Taipei, we have Cheng Youping, Director of the Political and Economic Research Center. Ms. Lei and Mr. Cheng, what a pleasure to see both of you. I do not want to talk about the elections directly because it's an election the localities is having right now, and the peoples need to go to the polls to make their own decisions. But rather, Ms. Lei, I want to emphasize on a few things. First of all, what do you think voters are really looking for from Taiwan?
Well, I think in a race this tight and this polarizing, most people believe that economics and other issues will not be the major determining factors. However, it so happens that the two main DPP party platforms and their main campaign agenda happen to have very huge and dire economic consequences. So while Han Kuo-yu, of course, used the typical change slogan, asking people, are you better off? But at the same time, people are very careful. The concerned electorate are thinking whether the no nuclear power plant by 2025 will really yield a green Taiwan, or it will actually deteriorate our economic basis as well as increase our carbon dioxide emission. In addition to that, the Resist China, Protect Taiwan slogan, which Tsai Ing-wen stood in front of a host of candidates and saying that she alone can protect Taiwan from China, is also being challenged because lots of people believe that regional integration and economic integration is the outcome for Taiwan's future. Without such, Taiwan will be an isolated, marginalized little island, and those two issues proposed by DPP both have very strong economic consequences plus their own livelihood. So all three are economic concerns.
Mr. Cheng, economic issue is the big issue. In fact, you see that reflected in so many different ways in economies around the world if you look at the chaos and disturbances over the past year. Mr. Cheng, to the residents in Taiwan, how specifically are those economic issues?
Well, most people in Taiwan are really very concerned with the economic future of Taiwan. Frankly speaking, just as Joanna just said earlier on, Han Kuo-yu asked people, are you better off? Are you happy today than 4 years ago? Are you worried about Taiwan's future? People are very worried about Taiwan's future because they don't know where Tsai Ing-wen is leading them to. Tsai Ing-wen's policies, especially with regard to the cross-strait relations, suddenly has put Taiwan in a very dangerous spot. And Tsai Ing-wen's position in the Asia-Pacific region seems to hold the United States as her major ally in fighting against mainland China. And that is not a welcome sign because among most citizens, people will welcome a peaceful coexistence, peaceful development with mainland China. People don't want war or confrontation. Most citizens feel that they want a comfortable life, they want it back. But 3.5 years gone by, Tsai Ing-wen has not produced any significant economic results. And therefore, tomorrow's election, I think it's going to be a major sign of people's dissatisfaction with Tsai Ing-wen's and DPP administration.
Ms. Lei, how vulnerable has Taiwan been or will Taiwan be if Taiwan is being used as a bargaining chip by some major power in the world, whether against China or for their own political or geopolitical advantage? To people in Taiwan, do they understand this issue inside out, Ms. Lei?
Well, I think there is a clear generational gap between people in Taiwan in their understanding of such gravity. Most people in 40 and or above, those cohorts, have either themselves experienced near war or their parents, their grandparents have experienced it. So they understand that war can be imminent at any given time, and the outcome is always disastrous to all parties involved. But for the younger generation, they're hearing a rhetoric by Tsai Ing-wen's government that now Taiwan is in its most dangerous time and there is an imminent threat across Taiwan Strait. And Tsai Ing-wen and her colleagues are the only ones leading them to wage such resistance. And these young generations have no historical recollection, such as 70 years ago when cross-straits are still at a warring state, we have experienced huge disastrous outcome in a true warring state, and they have no such recollection. So young people tend to believe that the KMT is appeasing without regarding their future and believing Tsai Ing-wen could be the resistance leader. However, Taiwan being situated in the center of the First Island chain, we are always part of any regional conflict or potential regional conflict. And Taiwan's history has been changed in many, many times due to regional conflicts. So I think people in Taiwan are deeply committed to peace and stability of the region at all costs.
Mr. Cheng, when people cast their votes, and even beyond, how much do you think real communication of the significance of this issue is being done? I mean, about peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, about Taiwan not being manipulated by Washington, for example, as a bargaining chip in the latter's dealing with Beijing, Mr. Cheng, particularly now.
Well, yes, I would have to say that most Taiwanese people do feel that Taiwan is only a pawn in the game. In other words, Taiwanese or Taiwan's government is not going to be a chess player in this game. You're just a pawn in the hands of the big powers. In other words, Taiwanese often feel that they're being tricked into playing along with the United States as a proxy in this region. And a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with the arms sales because American government obviously are selling outdated, expensive, which is not applicable to Taiwan situations, the kind of weapons, and they're selling us weapons that we don't really need. And people feel that we're being cheated, we're being taken advantage of. And many young people today, frankly speaking, even though they may buy into Tsai Ing-wen's lies or deceptions, but they certainly don't feel like going to war, and nobody's willing to fight for the so-called Taiwan independence, for sure.
Of course. It's one country, two systems. It's one China that across the street that has been agreed upon throughout history that has led to peace and stability, at least for now. And Ms. Lei, Mr. Cheng, if I could, before we go, we have 1 minute left in our discussion. How do you think Taiwan will be able to survive and thrive economically at a time of great uncertainty of all areas? Here I'm not talking about just regionally, but also internationally, when you see a lot of different uncertainties, both geopolitically and economically. Ms. Lei first.
Well, certainly, if you look at the U.S. plan, including in the NDAA 2020, Taiwan is a critical part of its West Pacific game plan. However, Taiwan must remain flexible in forming its alliances and safeguarding its current relationship with all neighbors independently, so that it will have its ability to choose how and when and if to form different alliances to the best interests of the people in Taiwan. And that freedom is very important.
Mr. Cheng, you have 20 seconds left, I'm afraid.
Taiwanese needs to understand that a stable and peaceful cross-strait relations is the very foundation of Taiwan's economic prosperity in the future.
Joanna Lei, and Cheng Yo-ping, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And also, for more on the issue, I sat down earlier with Yang Mingjie, the director of the Institute of Taiwan Studies at the China Academy of Social Sciences. He thinks whoever is elected the leader of Taiwan should prioritize people's livelihoods, and Taiwan should never become the bargaining chip between the United States and China. Let's listen in. Professor Yang, welcome to CGTN.
It's my great pleasure.
What do you make of the likely result of the election?
It's very difficult to make the forecast of elections.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a kind of gamble on that, but my personal opinion, I think no matter who will be elected as the leader of Taiwan, but there are some facts we can learn from the elections.
Like what?
The first one is that the ordinary people's life and their requirement have gave I think, big influence for the elections. That some people use the word 庶民, means ordinary people, especially for the low-income people. And during the development of Taiwan economy and social development, but they found they are isolated from the society. Their income is not increasing, and they are isolated from the social welfare systems. So they hope that the new leader, no matter DPP or KMT, pay much attention on their daily life, on their life standards, on their stability and safety.
But having said that, though, we have seen the temptation coming from some in Taiwan trying to block more interactions between the mainland and Taiwan, particularly so-called banning support on certain kinds of social groups and activities. Professor Yang, will these efforts, in a way, distance Taiwan further from the motherland?
My personal opinion, I have some afraid about that. Because no matter what law or legislation will be made in the future, but if DPP will continue its regime, I think they will enhance the so-called network to defend Taiwan. So what's the meaning of network? But for me, it's not network, it's a gap work. It will make distance between the mainland and the Taiwanese not only on economic level, but especially on people-to-people's level. They will have some, how to say, worry about the green terrorism or green terrorism regime.
Green terrorism, meaning the ruling people.
The ruling people use their power to make some like terrorism that just give a flag and we will punish you, but never know that you will violate the law. So that's ambiguous. Law can be regarded as a
the ambiguity of the law, in a way, indicating.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Professor Yang, what do you think of the future nature of the Taiwan issue in terms of its impact on China-U.S. relations? Now, China has always said it is the core of this bilateral relations.
For me, I think it can be regarded as two things on both sides. One side, the Taiwan issue is an internal affairs, that no matter what will happen in the outside world, and the cross-strait mainland and Taiwanese people, we are Chinese people, we will pursue the unification forever. We will enhance our cooperation, we will make integration, and we will do our best efforts by ourselves. That is one side. On the other side, because Taiwan is so conflict issues, it's related to some other foreign issues, like you mentioned about the Sino-U.S. relations. And the United States, no matter who will be the president next term, but I think they will want to increase the role of Taiwan in the framework of Indo-Pacific. That will support Taiwan on military sales and military defense cooperation and even some other so-called value cooperation, something like that. But that will make much more dangerous for not only for Sino-U.S. relations, but also for the future of Taiwan.
Yeah. What is the bottom line China has?
Bottom line, I think, is very clear that sovereignty and territory unification.
What does that mean?
That means that we have made in our law that if there's some separation, declaration of separation of Taiwan from the homeland country, that's bottom line. If foreign countries want to intervene in Taiwan internal affairs to damage and to destroy the so-called sovereignty and territory integration, that is red line.
Professor Yang, we have been hearing from scholars suggesting Taiwan needs to make sure it does not make itself a bargaining chip for the United States with China. But on the other hand, people also wonder what's likely to be the way that the mainland will deal with Taiwan. For example, some scholars suggest the mainland has been talking about the military power. They feel being threatened, and they also suggested that the cultures on both sides have grown apart rather than more similarity as they were. Professor Yang, what do you make of these comments?
I don't think Taiwan will play as a bargaining chip, not only for the United States, but also for China. In the negotiation with the United States, Taiwan issues never talked to make a bargain because it's on sovereignty issues. We don't want to make sovereignty issues as a bargaining, as a make a deal. But for what we do for prepare for the future risk or dangers, we can do everything, but the military means always regarded as the last one choice or measures to deal with that issue.
Hong Kong issue.
Yeah.
Some say will have some spillover effect on the issue of Taiwan and Taiwan's relations with the mainland. What do you think?
For me, I don't so pessimistic about the Hong Kong issues' impact on Taiwan. For me, I think we can study that issues from a long term, from a historical view, that Hong Kong issues give us about how could we deal with one country, two system. Maybe we meet some problem, but how could we avoid that problem in the future with Taiwan, with Macau? So Hong Kong is, for me, I think, for long term, can be regarded as one very good practical beginning for one country, two system process.
What have you learned so far?
So far, I learned that the Hong Kong issues is, as I mentioned, the people at first. Because when we do some governance, we have to pay attention to really focus on the people's requirement, as mentioned about Taiwan issues. Secondly is that we have to worry about foreign intervention. Yeah.
When it comes to foreign intervention, whether you like it or not, there would always be ones who try to do that.
They always want to do, but I said that all the issues decided by ourselves. The foreign intervention is not foreign aid. We welcome foreign aid and foreign investment, but if there's some foreign investment, that will make a lot of trouble and violence. So we can learn from the Hong Kong issue that violence is not welcome by ordinary people.
One of the things people have been talking about is what's going on in the Hong Kong educational system, particularly regarding the young people's knowledge about the mainland, and to build some common memories, consensus with the mainland. Professor Yang, it's no secret that the DPP administration now try to eliminate as much as possible contents related to the mainland or relating to the concept of China in the textbooks and educational system. So in the long term, are you worried?
I have some worry, but I also have some confidence about the future. As I mentioned, education is very important. Also that DPP and some pro-Taiwan independence group want to re-education on the Chinese culture and history, something like that. But I think that because that more Taiwanese are visiting China, do their business and education in mainland, they can learn from the news media, from the people-to-people communication that what the culture is, what the history is. I think another important issue is that they can learn from the mainland China that the mainland China development gives them a lot of opportunities. So education not only textbook, it's also practical textbook.
Well said. Thank you so much, Professor Yang.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.